Welcome to another deep dive. We are so glad you could join us today. I'm going to start by taking a little trip down memory lane.
Oh, yeah. That is always a fun exercise.
Right, so try to remember your very first day at your current job. If you can visualize walking through those doors or maybe logging into that first remote meeting.
It is usually pretty nerve-wracking.
Completely. Remember that distinct, almost visceral feeling of awkwardness? Like you didn't know where the coffee was?
Or the unwritten rules about how long lunch should actually be.
Exactly. You
Okay.
probably felt like you were on this desperate high-stakes quest just to fit in without looking foolish.
We have all been there.
It is a totally universal human experience.
Oh.
But the mechanics behind how we navigate that transition, they are incredibly complex.
Extremely complex, yeah.
So today we are looking at a stack of excerpts from Catherine Miller's academic text on organizational communication.
Right.
And our mission for this deep dive is to decode those hidden mechanics. We want to really understand how a person moves from being a bewildered outsider to a seasoned, confident insider.
Because it is a profound shift.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it is a lot more intricate than simply signing an HR form, getting a security badge, and reading the employee handbook.
It is a profound psychological and communicative shift. The overarching concept we are dealing with here is called assimilation.
Assimilation, right.
People often assume that joining a company is a one-way street. You know, a scenario where the organization simply molds the new employee to fit its machine.
Like a cookie cutter.
Exactly. But assimilation is actually a dual process. You have socialization, which is the organization attempting to influence and shape you to fit its culture and rules.
Okay.
But then you also have individualization.
Which is exactly.
That is the counter process, where you, the employee, are actively trying to change the organization, or at least your specific corner of it, to suit your own needs, abilities, and desires.
So it is a constant, subtle push and pull.
Precisely. And what's fascinating here is that this journey doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds over a great span of time, generally divided into 3 distinct phases.
Which are?
Anticipatory socialization, the encounter phase, and finally metamorphosis.
I want to focus on that first phase, anticipatory socialization, because the name implies we are doing a lot of the heavy lifting before we even get an offer letter.
Oh, absolutely.
When we look at a knowledgeable professional entering the workforce, this isn't just about reading a company's About Us page the night before an interview, is it?
Far from it. The anticipation phase actually encompasses deeply ingrained societal conditioning that begins long before you target a specific company.
How really are we talking?
Childhood. A major part of this is learning about the construct of work in general. Think about a parent telling an 8-year-old to get their work done, meaning chores or homework.
Oh, wow. So that instills the basic meaning of labor.
Right. We internalize powerful cultural messages about what labor means.
You know, the source material points out how scholar Robin Clare argues that the colloquialism getting a real job is a really powerful message.
It is a very potent societal mechanism.
Because by the time someone reaches adulthood, they have already absorbed this highly specific, often capitalist understanding of what a real job is supposed to look like.
Usually implying a 9-to-5 schedule, a salary, and upward mobility.
Right. As opposed to seasonal work, waiting tables, or gig labor.
Yeah.
That messaging shapes your entire baseline expectation of adulthood and professional success.
That is the first aspect. But then there's the second aspect, which is learning about a specific occupation.
Like picking a career path.
Exactly. The source gives a great example of a child wanting to be a veterinarian because they love their dog,
Sure.
which eventually leads to reading books, visiting clinics, and pursuing vet school. You are socializing yourself into that vocational identity years before you hold the title.
You build an entire persona around the occupation. But eventually that broad vocational dream has to narrow down to a specific organization.
Which is the third aspect. And that involves a massive amount of proactive information gathering. Let's use the source's example of a college senior researching a company called Compass Stuff.
Before they even submit a resume, they're scouring the company's website.
Right, analyzing their social media tone, looking up employee reviews through placement centers. They are building a mental model of the organization's culture so they can adapt to it.
And all this happens before the interview even takes place.
Exactly.
The interview itself is such a fascinating performance. The company is screening you, but you are also actively screening them, trying to peek behind the curtain.
It is a two-way evaluation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the source material introduces this concept of realistic job previews, or RJPs.
Yes, RJPs are a crucial part of this phase.
When I was reading through this, I have to admit it sounds like a terrible corporate strategy. If I am a hiring manager, why would I intentionally highlight the worst, most monotonous parts of a job to a candidate?
It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Doesn't that risk spooking the top talent and driving them away?
It is a common fear among recruiters, and you do risk losing some candidates who might view the negative aspects as a deal breaker.
So why do it?
Because the data on expectation management points to a much deeper psychological benefit, RJPs act as a highly effective form of persuasive communication.
Okay, give me an example.
Imagine interviewing someone for a high-volume receptionist or customer service role.
Okay.
Instead of painting a rosy picture of endless team building and cheerful client interactions, the interviewer provides a stark, realistic preview. They warn the applicant that the job involves heavy workloads, long periods of monotony, and occasionally dealing with highly abusive clients.
Which is an incredibly daunting pitch to sit through as an applicant.
It is, but consider the psychology of the person who still takes the job after hearing that. Their expectations are now perfectly aligned with the reality of the role.
So when that first abusive client inevitably yells at them on a Tuesday afternoon, they don't experience a massive breach of the psychological contract.
Exactly. They don't feel betrayed or lied to by the company. They simply think, well, they warned me this would happen.
That makes total sense. Because their expectations were managed up front, it drastically reduces the chances of voluntary turnover later.
They are far less likely to quit after 3 weeks out of sheer disillusionment, saving the company significant rehiring costs.
I see the utility in that. You are basically inoculating the employee against the inevitable friction of the job.
That is a great way to put it.
So let's assume the RJP works. You accept the reality of the role you sign the offer, and now you transition into the second phase.
The encounter phase.
This is the famous point of entry. You are physically in the building, or you are logging into the company intranet on day one. The expert scholar Merrill Louis describes this phase as one of intense change, contrast, and surprise.
It is a massive sense-making event. Your pre-hire expectations violently collide with the day-to-day reality, and you have to let go of old values to make sense of the new ones.
That sounds exhausting.
It is a period of very high cognitive load. During this encounter phase, newcomers have to decipher 2 distinct categories of information.
What is the first one?
Role-related information. This is the practical functional knowledge required to execute your duties.
Like how the word processing program actually works.
Exactly. How does the proprietary software work? What is the approval process for a budget? It is the functional nuts and bolts.
Got it. And the second category?
The second category is cultural information. These are the unwritten rules and norms. And to explain this, we often reference Edgar Schein's onion model.
An onion model. I like that. So we are peeling back layers.
Exactly. The outermost layer consists of artifacts and behaviors. These are the visible, tangible things you notice on your very first day.
So the physical layout of the office, the technology people use, whether they communicate via formal emails or casual chats.
Right. But that doesn't actually tell you how the company breathes. To understand that, you have to peel back to the middle layer, which consists of the stated values.
These are the conscious, articulated philosophies of the company.
Yes, it is the innovation-first slogans plastered on the walls. But if you peel back even further to the very core of the onion, you find the basic assumptions.
And what are those?
These are the deeply embedded, almost unconscious paradigms that govern how people view human nature and relationships.
Can you give an example of a core assumption?
Sure. Does the organization fundamentally assume that employees are inherently lazy and need to be heavily monitored? Or do they assume employees are intrinsically motivated and should be granted total autonomy?
Nobody hands you a manual detailing those core assumptions on your first day.
No, they don't.
And because there is no manual, culture has to be transmitted through the ether. The text notes that this often happens through memorable messages.
Yes, narratives and truisms that just stick with you.
The research highlights humor as one of the most potent vehicles for this transmission. There is a fascinating study by Heiss and Carmack on how humor is used to communicate job expectations indirectly.
Humor is incredibly effective because it allows veteran employees to inculcate values and correct newcomer behavior without the high social cost of an overt confrontation.
The study offers a perfect scenario. Imagine a newcomer walks into a staff meeting 5 minutes late.
Right. A veteran employee might chuckle and say, well, glad you could fit us into your busy schedule.
It gets a laugh from the room. It diffuses the immediate tension, but it serves a highly surgical purpose.
It is a socially acceptable veiled warning. It tells the newcomer, we notice when you are late, and punctuality is a strict norm here.
While simultaneously reinforcing that exact cultural value for all the veteran employees sitting at the table, you learn the boundary by being the punchline of the joke.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it demonstrates that newcomers aren't just passively sitting around waiting for HR to train them. They are proactive sense makers.
They are actively seeking information to reduce their anxiety.
Yes. And according to Miller and Jablin, the tactics a newcomer uses to seek that information depend heavily on the social costs of asking.
I want to dig into that concept of social cost because the psychological friction of those first few months is intense. You want to look competent, but you also don't know anything yet.
That tension dictates your behavior. If you need to know a simple computer password, the social cost of asking is practically zero.
Right, nobody expects you to magically know the password on day one.
So you use an overt tactic. You directly ask a coworker. But imagine a scenario where the social cost is high.
Like trying to figure out how formal to be with the department heads.
Exactly. Do you challenge their ideas or do you defer completely?
You definitely cannot just walk up to a colleague and ask, hey, does the boss have a fragile ego? The social cost of that question is astronomical.
You would look incredibly unprofessional, so you abandon overt questions and rely on covert tactics.
Like what?
You become an observer. You silently watch how other people interact with the boss in the room. Or you might use a disguising conversation tactic.
Where you subtly steer a casual chat with a coworker toward a recent project to see how they referred to the boss's management style.
You are actively mapping the political and cultural minefield without ever revealing your own ignorance.
It is essentially corporate espionage just to survive the probationary period.
It really is.
So let's imagine you survive the encounter phase. You have peeled the cultural onion, you decoded the memorable messages, and you understand the basic assumptions.
You are ready for the final stage.
Right. You transition into the third stage metamorphosis. You are now an accepted participating insider.
But the relationship is still in flux.
So what does this all mean for your day-to-day existence? The job description you are hired for rarely matches the actual work you end up doing a year later.
This brings us back to the concept of individualization we mentioned at the start. Your role is highly malleable.
Okay.
Researchers look at this through the lens of leader-member exchange theory, or LMX, developed by George Grain.
Leader-member exchange theory.
Yes. LMX posits that your specific role is developed through an ongoing social exchange between you and your supervisor, progressing through 3 distinct phases.
What is the first phase?
It begins with role-taking. This is the sampling phase. The supervisor is essentially testing the waters to see what you're actually capable of.
Beyond what your resume claimed.
Right. The flow of communication is largely one way. The source gives a great example of a supervisor named Laura and a new sales rep named Josh.
Okay, what happens with Laura and Josh?
Laura asks Josh to update a client list, specifically targeting urgent care facilities on a tight deadline.
So she is testing him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She is observing. Does Josh ask clarifying questions? Does he deliver clean data? The supervisor gives the role and the employee takes it.
But surely that one-way dynamic cannot last forever. At some point, the employee has to push back or negotiate.
And that leads to the second phase, role-making.
Role-making.
This is where the true negotiation happens. The communication shifts from one-way to two-way.
So Josh might push back a little.
Exactly. Josh might tell Laura he can take on the company's social media management, but in exchange he needs more staff help or a break from other tasks.
He is offering his specialized time and skills, and in return, the supervisor is offering formal rewards, structural support, and resources.
They are mutually writing the reality of the job.
And that negotiation eventually stabilizes into the final LMX phase.
Yeah. Yes. Role routinization. The dust settles, and the newly negotiated role is well understood by both parties.
The supervisor and the employee have established a predictable rhythm.
But this routinization phase reveals a stark reality about organizational life. Not all supervisor-subordinate relationships stabilize in the same way.
This creates a continuum among employees. This is the divide between the in-group and the out-group.
Precisely. Through the crucible of negotiation, some employees secure a spot in the supervisor's in-group.
What does that look like?
These relationships are highly collaborative. They are characterized by deep mutual trust, high mutual influence, and significant rewards.
An in-group employee has a lot of latitude. They have the supervisor's ear.
They are the trusted lieutenants, But if you fall on the other end of the continuum, you end up in the out group.
And this doesn't necessarily mean you are a bad employee, right?
Not at all. It just means the relationship relies entirely on formal authority. There is low trust and low mutual influence.
The relationship is strictly contractual. You stick strictly to your formal job description, nothing more, nothing less.
You don't get flexible deadlines, and your supervisor manages you strictly by the book. The latitude to individualize your role practically disappears.
It is wild to zoom out and look at this entire trajectory.
It is a massive communicative journey.
From internalizing what a real job meant when we were kids to surviving the cultural espionage of our first week, all the way to negotiating trust and resources with a supervisor to secure an in-group position.
And it reinforces a profound point. You are not just a passive cog dropped into a pre-existing machine container.
By communicating, you actually constitute the organization. You bring it into existence. You have the agency to individualize your role just as much as the organization socializes you.
This raises an important question, though.
What is that?
We have spent this entire deep dive examining the architecture of Cummings. We have talked about the anticipation, the entry, the culture shock, and the assimilation.
And all the beginnings.
But we cannot ignore the often ignored final phase of organizational life, which is organizational exit.
The goings.
Yes. In our modern economy, characterized by the disposable worker and constant job transfers, leaving an organization is a profound communicative process.
It extends far beyond just handing in a resignation letter.
Think about the complex emotional landscape of the people left behind the stairs. When a colleague exits the stairs, might experience a surge of relief if the departing person was toxic.
Or they might feel crushing resentment as they absorb the departing person's workload.
In scenarios of corporate downsizing, they often wrestle with profound survivor's guilt. If entering an organization requires you to reshape so much of your identity and learn an entirely new culture, what happens to those stairs?
How do we untangle our identities when it is time to walk out the door?
It is a massive disruption to the psychological contract.
That is a deeply provocative thought to leave off on. We spend immense amounts of energy figuring out how to belong. But the mechanics of unbelonging are something we rarely prepare for.
It is definitely a concept to keep in mind.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden mechanics of the workplace. As you head into your office or log into your team channels tomorrow, take a closer look around. Observe the memorable messages being passed around, decode the unwritten rules, and maybe ask yourself, are you currently operating in the in-group or the out-group?
A very good question to ask.
Until next time, keep questioning the world around you.